Let's evaluate prostate cancer T staging. I'd like to make three major points. First, the very early stages do not have an imaging correlate. Second, let's highlight where MRI is at its best in T staging. And third, let's develop a somewhat systematic practical approach to evaluating when the T stage becomes significant and disease extends outside of the prostate. So let's begin with the early T stages. TX, primary tumor, cannot be assessed. T0, no evidence of primary tumor. T1, clinically inapparent tumor, neither palpable nor visible by imaging. So again, no imaging correlate to here. T1A, tumor incidental histologic finding in 5% of tissue resected. T1B, tumor as an incidental histologic finding in more than 5%. So again, this depends on histology, not imaging. And then T1C, tumor is identified by needle biopsy, for example, because the PSA had been elevated. So all through here, the imaging doesn't play a role. Now T2, imaging plays a role because we're going to decide if the tumor is confined to the prostate or out of the prostate using certain visual methodologies. And we're going to hammer home those visual methodologies as we discussed in the beginning. T2, confined to the prostate. Now this Roman numeral 1 means the tumor is found in one or both lobes by needle biopsy, but it's not palpable or reliably seen by imaging, and this would be classified as a T1C if the imaging is negative, even though it's confined to the prostate. If the tumor is a T2A, then the tumor involves 1/2 of one lobe or less. A T2B, the tumor involves more than 1/2 of one lobe, but not both lobes. A T2C, the tumor involves both lobes, which means you have to go back to our lobar anatomy discussion, which is in one of our earlier vignettes. So at the T2A, B, and C level, MR has a role in staging. Now we have pathologic staging over here on the right, but there is no pathologic staging correlate in these lower areas. So there's no imaging correlate from TX to T1C, and there's no pathologic correlate. I'm going to let you read through on your own rather than recite them back to you, the pathologic staging classification. But you can see it pretty much follows the classification system that we have for definitions on the left, and as we'll proceed further on. We're also going to tackle more distant disease in this classification system by looking at lymph nodes and metastases, and we'll do that in a separate vignette. Right now, I'd like to focus on the T2 capsular confinement. So when is a tumor confined on imaging within the capsule? 1, when the capsule, which is this peripheral area right here, right there, it's the outer edge, also known as the anatomic capsule. There'll also be a pseudocapsule, which defines the margin between the central area of the prostate, known as the TZ, and that is known as the anatomic capsule. The anatomic capsule, true capsule on the outside, the surgical capsule, a pseudocapsule on the inside. So if this anatomic capsule is blurred or infiltrated, we lose that dark line, we have lost capsular confinement. Or if this capsule starts to bulge, if it's pushed out by an area of signal hypointensity on a T2 weighted image, that's another sign that we may not have capsular confinement. A third sign, if we have a broad area of capsular contact. Now the literature says about 1.2 is when the hairs on the back of your neck should stand up. But as you get above 1.5 and 2 centimeters of capsular contact, the likelihood of capsular invasion starts to go up logarithmically rather than linearly. So that 1.2 to 2 centimeters of capsular contact is kind of a critical area. And when you're above 2 centimeters of capsular contact, it's highly likely that you have microcapsular invasion, even though you might not see the surrounding fat infiltrated by the tumor, the surrounding fat represented by our white background. So with this, We'll stop right here, and then we'll carve out the next part of the T staging as we move up the ladder.